Hi everyone, MD Anthony Drums Tano here, today bringing you a video that no one asked for, which is my top 10 albums of 2020, along with some honourable mentions and my favourite EPs of the year also. 2020 has been a rough year for obvious reasons, but there's actually been some pretty good music that's come out despite the numerous album delays, some album cancellations in some part. And yeah, despite all of that, we've had actually some pretty good records. And today, because everyone has opinions and I like giving mine, as is plainly obvious, I decided that I would go through my top 10 albums of the year. And if you are like me, you're a nerd for these things and you love top 10s and you love making lists and blah, 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 then leave yours in the comment section below and I will respond to it with my thoughts on it as well. Maybe I'll give it a rating out of 10. Who knows? We'll see. Leave yours in the comments below and it'd be great to read through all of your top 10 lists as well. Before we get into the albums, let's quickly talk about EPs. So I'm only really going to mention two. One being my runner-up EP of the year, which actually goes to Bring Me the Horizon with Post-Human Survival Horror. I think it's a great EP, which is let down by one or two tracks. I did actually record and release a drum cover of the song Dear Diary, the opening song from this EP. A few weeks ago. You can click up here, one of these corners, if you'd like to check that out. But yeah, it's a great EP with some really good songs on it. Bring Me the Horizon going back to some of their Suicide Season-y-ish roots on this EP. But yeah, one or two tracks that I think aren't great, which is the reason it's not my number one. Leading me into my number one EP of the year, which actually goes to James Blake and his EP Before. I imagine a lot of you watching this have no idea who James Blake is, so I'll give a brief introduction. He is a British singer, songwriter, producer, beat maker extraordinaire. He came to my attention when he supported Kendrick Lamar on his 2017 UK tour. I thought he gave a great performance. I've listened to kind of bits and pieces of his stuff since then, never really got into it, but then this EP was released, I think in October of this year. And whenever I felt like I don't want to listen to rock or metal or anything remotely loud and heavy, this is the EP I've gone to. It's straightforward in the sense that it's kind of relaxing, I guess. Not really the best word to describe it, but it's 4 songs that are very serene, very graceful, very beautiful, each with different kind of vibes to them. And as I say, it's been my go-to if I don't want to get shouted at while I'm listening to music. It's a really just kind of relaxing, nice EP to listen to. Expertly produced, some great vocal hooks on it. Well worth your time. Before we go into the honourable mentions for my albums of the year, I just want to say what my least favourite album of the year is. And it's kind of no surprise. If you've listened to this album, you will understand. Corey M.F. Taylor with... I think the album is just self-titled. I honestly don't remember because I listened to it once and I thought, oh my god, I'm never listening to this ever again. I love Slipknot. I don't mind a bit of Stone Sour. And I'm a huge fan and I have a lot of time, a lot of respect for Corey Taylor. But this album is, this album's a tough listen. It's cringy, it's corny. You could say that it's fun. And it's definitely an expression for Corey, like a side of Corey that we don't see. So... fair play to him for making it. It's his decision, it's his life, it's his record, it's whatever he wants to do. But it's a pretty bad record. So we'll fly through my honourable mentions quickly because I don't want this video to be too long. My first honourable mention goes to the Acacia Strain with their album Decay. Never really listened to Acacia much until this year. Put this album on because it popped up on Spotify saying, new this week. And straight from the get-go, I really enjoyed it. I just think it kind of dips in quality in the middle, picks back up towards the end, so that's why it's just an honourable mention for me, but still a great album. On a similar vibe, kind of, my next honourable mention, Bleed From Within with their album The End of All We Know. I really wanted to put this into my top 10 just because Bleed From Within are one of those bands who never get the credit they deserve. They've been consistently brilliant for the past 12 years that they've been going, probably longer than that to be honest, but I've been aware of them for about 12 years. And they kind of go like this, where they release an album and they get some hype behind them and then they just don't do anything. They don't tour, they don't release anything new. And then they go on this repeat cycle of that. So this album is really, really good. It's probably the best album they've released ever, in my opinion. Is it? Yeah, probably, maybe. I don't know. Different conversation. But they definitely deserve more credit as a band. They deserve to be more famous than they are. So if you watching this have no idea who they are and you like heavy metal, you like a bit of deathcore, then check out Bleed From Within. This new album does sound a lot like Parkway Drive, which has been a criticism from quite a few people, especially given how Bleed From Within sounded 10 years ago. But it's still a great album and well worth your time. My next honourable mention is actually going to be Code Orange. I love Code Orange. I wear my Code Orange t-shirt quite often when I make videos. And I really, really liked I Am King, and especially Forever. I think Forever is a phenomenal album. Would have been my album of the year if I made one of these in 2018. But Underneath just never quite sunk its teeth into me. And I have tried. I've listened to it, God, upwards of 15, 20 times now. And I do really like songs on there. So Swallowing the Rabbit Hole, again, made a drum cover of that song. I think it's fantastic. I really like Who I Am. And that's the thing. The rest of it, I'm kind of nonplussed about. I think it's good. I think it's great in many respects, but it just never quite grabbed me in the way that Forever did. I don't think it's heavy enough. I don't think it's fast enough. I don't think it's aggressive enough. And they're relying a little bit too heavily on the kind of quirky, interesting production techniques that they're getting known for now. And I think the album kind of suffers for it. This is just my opinion, obviously, but don't know why I felt the need to say that right there. But yeah, it's just an honourable mention for me in this list. Two albums that I completely forgot about, really, and I just hate myself for forgetting to listen to them. Good Tiger with, oh God, what's it called? Raised in a Doomsday Cult. You might be thinking, I know that band, Good Tiger. Where do I know that from? It's because they used to be Alex Rudinger's band, or he used to be the drummer for Good Tiger. They released 2 albums with Alex, A Head Full of Moonlight, which showed a lot of promise. The second album was The Devil Thinks I'm Sinking, I think it's called. Or that might be a song. Either way, that second album I thought was fantastic. They dropped the screamed vocals, and Elliot Coleman, formerly of Tesseract, he just sings the whole album, and it's better for it. But yeah, that's probably where you know them from, Alex Rudinger. Sadly, he doesn't play on this new album. However, JP Bouvet recorded drums on this album, and I have listened to it once earlier this week when I suddenly remembered, oh my God, Good Tiger made an album this year, and the drums on it are phenomenal. So Alex will be missed, but JP did a fantastic job. Another album that I just totally forgot came out and didn't listen to, and I'm annoyed at myself for doing so, is the solo album, the debut solo album from Greg Puciato, of course, from the Dillinger Escape Plan and the Black Queen, and Kill or Be Killed. And this album is called Child Soldier, just released as Greg Puciato, so none of those other bands I just mentioned. Yeah, it's called Child Soldier, and I just forgot it came out. It's been on my Spotify library for months, pretty much since it was released, and I don't know what happened. I just forgot to listen to it. I don't know why I'm mentioning it now, but I've done it now, so we're going to run with it. Okay, into the top 10, so what you're all here for, and kicking things off at number 10, a band who I didn't know existed until this year, Sata, with the album Locus. Sata are like if Dance Gavin Dance had some kind of weird baby with Meshuggah. You get Sata. I had a video pop up on my subscription feed from Kayam Interviews, Tim Kayam. He started doing a series where he was showcasing drummers from kind of little known bands or people who just wanted a bit more exposure. And this video popped up of a guy called Brody Smith playing a song called Bird by the band Sata. And I thought, yeah, I'll watch that. And oh my God, this guy can drum. This one video sold me on the band because Brody Smith is an outrageous drummer. I'll actually leave that video linked to the description if you want to check it out. But more about the album because that's what we're here for. So 2 vocalists, one who does the kind of shouty thing and another one who sings. And they both have kind of unique styles and unique sounding voices, which might be a turn off for some people. I know it was kind of a turn off for my friend who I recommended this album to. But if you like them, I think you'll really like this album. Or if you're a musician and you like the style of music, then they did actually release Locus as an instrumental album as well, so you can check that out if you want. My favourite songs from this album would be Mushroom, which is actually an instrumental song, funnily enough, on either version of the album. It's just a phenomenal, I think it's like 2.5-3 minute blast where all of the members of the band are just going ham on their instruments. But it sounds great. Number 9 on my list, and our first trip down under on the list, is going to go to Violent Soho, who are a band who have never really been big outside of Australia. For those of you that don't know, they are kind of like a Nirvana-ish inspired punk rock band, I guess. I don't know, they're kind of hard to describe, but yeah, if you want something that's still sort of heavy and aggressive, but in a more chilled out way, if that makes any sense at all, then Violent Soho are a brilliant band. They write some great songs. They've got some really catchy riffs and vocal hooks. And yeah, this is just another great album by a great band. It's called Everything Is A-OK. I don't think it's quite as good as their previous album, Waco, which I think came out in 2016 or 2017. So we've had to wait a while for this new record. And I love Waco. I think it's their best album. So it was going to be tough for me personally to enjoy this new album as much. But I think it's still a fantastic album. There's a reason it's number 9 in my list. And yeah, if you like the sound of a kind of more chilled out Nirvana, then check out Violent Soho. Number 8 on my list, one of the best bands in the UK, consistently one of the best bands in the UK for the last, again, 10 years. I'm talking about Palm Reader. I'm sure, again, Palm Reader are a band that many of you are thinking, who the hell is this? They've never really been that big outside of the UK. I think they've got a decent following in Europe, but yeah, even then they're criminally overlooked and underrated within the UK. And yeah, they just make really good songs. It's hard to explain, and they're definitely a hard band to box. Like, you can't really label them in any kind of genre. I would say maybe post-hardcore for the new album, atmospheric post-hardcore. But this album, it would be higher on my list, I think, if they'd released it earlier in the year, because I've only listened to it maybe 5 or 6 times. But I absolutely adore it. I think it's almost flawless. There's 1 or 2 songs which I think are a bit weak, but for the most part, this is an empowering, soaring album with just, again, phenomenal vocals. The drums on this album, Dan Olds, the drummer, just gives the performance of his life. He's always been a great drummer, but especially on this album, which is called Sleepless, by the way, should have mentioned that. The drums on this record are just absolutely exquisite. And it's a really great album. Palm Reader are another band that are worthy of your attention if you like anything that's kind of hardcore, post-hardcore, even aspects of metalcore inspired. Yeah, check out Palm Reader, because they are just outrageously overlooked. At the number 7 spot, we have a band that have been around for like 40 years, but still continuously put out incredible, near-perfect records. Napalm Death. When you actually get into this band, you realise that they're not just, I mean, on the face of it, a name like Napalm Death, the music they perform, you would think that they have lyrics akin to Slayer or Gore or one of those bands. Nothing against Slayer or Gore, of course. I love Slayer. But yeah, Napalm Death have got far more nuance to them. Barney, as a vocalist and a lyricist, is extremely intelligent and writes really meaningful, metaphorical, sometimes, often straight to the point as well, though, lyrics about humanitarian issues, political issues. Yeah, just there's far more to Napalm Death than I think you would assume just from the outset. And this album kind of proves that point even further, because this is a death metal album, or a grind, not really that grind. There's elements of grind still in it, of course, but this is a death metal album played by punks. What I mean by that is that Napalm Death have always been a band who wear their punk influence on their sleeve, and I feel like in this album, which is called Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism, great album title. I think it wins album title of the year. Yeah, this album even more so wears those punk influences on its sleeve. None more so on the track than on the track Amoral, or Amoral, I'm not really sure how you say that word, which is basically a punk song played by a death metal band who are punk fans. Don't for 1 minute though think that this is a punk album or a soft, slow album, because if you listen to my second favourite track on the album, which is called Backlash Just Because, you will see that this band is still very, very much rooted in their death, grindcore roots, and they're not afraid to show them and use them to full force when required, such as the closing riff on Backlash Just Because. They're a band that have been around for so long, and they are often kind of written off as just, oh, they invented grindcore. Oh yeah, they're just a really heavy, fast band. Yes, they are, but there is so much more to Napalm Death than just that. And this album, and I'm going to say the title again just because I want to, Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism. this album really goes to show that they are not just a one-trick pony, and they are better than 99% of young bands, which feels bad because I'm all about promoting young bands and like young musicians. But Napalm Death set the bar so high, so consistently that they're impossible to overlook, and that's why they are my number 7 album of the year. They have earned my number 7 album of the year. Time for something completely different. Number 6 on my list is Clipping with Visions of Bodies Being Burned. This album is the second album in the space of like 12 months from Clipping, following a very similar theme to last year's There Existed an Addiction to Blood. Even the album artworks are pretty much identical, and the themes of the album. But for the uninitiated, Clipping are 3 people: rapper David Diggs, rapper and frontman, who sounds unlike any rapper you've ever heard, and then 2 producers in the form of William Hudson and Jonathan Snipes. I think that's their names. I'm just going to Google that because I'll feel bad if I get it wrong. Okay, I was right. William Hudson and Jonathan Snipes. 2 fantastic producers working alongside one of the most charismatic, enigmatic, and interesting rappers in the game. Can I get away with saying that? Probably not. They make ambient and horror inspired rap songs, or in some elements R&B songs, and the production is really turned up to 11 in the sense of you just kind of don't really know what's coming next. They use elements of like just straight up white noise at times. Yeah, they use some really interesting and out of the box production techniques, but they make it work. It's not like tacky, or it's not just kind of stitched on to the end of a song or just randomly thrown in. They weave it into the song in a way that is genuinely musical and astoundingly well done. For me, the albums are almost 2 sides of the same coin. So, I mean, the new album, Visions of Bodies Being Burned, and last year's album, There Existed an Addiction to Blood. I think last year's album, There Existed, was more of a showcase of David Diggs as a frontman and his ability to deliver this cold and heartless, but at the same side, like in the same sense, it was powerful and frightening and gripping. This excellent performance of how to deliver rapped vocals and sometimes just straight up spoken word in a really gripping and just terrifying way. Whereas the new album, Visions of Bodies, I feel like it's more of the 2 producers, Hudson and Snipes. I feel like it's them showcasing their skills more so. That's not to say that either way round, that, you know, David still gives a great performance on this album, and last year Hudson and Snipes still did superb production on that album. But I feel like they kind of use these 2 albums to shine individually, even though obviously the duo of producers kind of shine together. But they've yet again produced just an incredible, diverse, frightening, interesting, gripping. I could go on and on about my love for this album. But moving on to number 5, and I'll try and pick up the pace. My next album is Biffy Clyro with A Celebration of Endings. Biffy Clyro are a band that I've never really gone that hard into. I've always liked them kind of consistently. I think they've got some brilliant songs like That Golden Rule, Boom Blast and Ruin. I've had like a respect for them as just a trio of excellent musicians who gel really well together. Of course, the bassist and the drummer are brothers, which, you know, they probably have that. If you believe in that stuff, they've got that link, you know, where they just understand each other really well. And I think Biffy is as a result of that. The band is a result of 2 brothers who understand each other really well, and then Simon Neil, who is just one of the best, one of the most charismatic frontmen the UK has ever produced. And yes, I'm claiming him as the UK. I know they are Scottish and they are very proud to be Scottish, but for the purpose of this video, they're from the UK. I decided to listen to the new Biffy album in full and kind of immediately fell in love with it. I think it's really quirky. It's got some excellently catchy songs on there. For example, Tiny Indoor Fireworks, I think is a phenomenal, really, really catchy song. My least favourite song on the album is actually the lead single, which was called Instant History. I think it stands out as like this weird kind of like Imagine Dragons style song, and it just doesn't really work for me. But the rest of the album, especially the closing song, Cop Syrup, which is like early days of Biffy where they were more mathy and more hardcore inspired, mixed with this kind of weird ethereal orchestral piece just halfway through the song. Sounds weird, but trust me, the song works. My favourite song on the album, Cop Syrup. And yeah, it's just a really good album. I'm sure many of you know who Biffy are. So if you've ever been vaguely interested in listening to their music, then this is definitely not a bad place to start. Number 4 on the list goes to Deathtones with the album Ohms. Kind of put this t-shirt on just to throw you all off, pull a little sneaky on you. Yeah, it's not my number 1. I thought it would be because I adore Deathtones, one of my favourite bands ever. But yeah, there's just been 3 other albums this year that I think are slightly better. I don't think this is the best Deathtones album ever. I think it's up there for sure. I think it's maybe one of the top 3, top 4. And it has some fantastic songs, my particular favourite being The Spell of Mathematics. But there's not much that I can say that hasn't already been said about this album. Deathtones are one of those bands that successfully transitioned out of nu metal and into more just kind of like an alternative metal kind of style. Still heavy, still crushing when they need to be. On this album, The Link is Dead proves that, once and for all, Deathtones very much are still a heavy band. But they have these beautiful soaring passages. They're so atmospheric. Steph Carpenter can write a hell of a riff, and Abe Cunningham, for my money, is one of the most overlooked, underrated drummers of his generation. The way that he writes hip-hop inspired beats in metal songs and makes it work and has really nuanced and dynamic fills along the way. I just think he's a fantastic drummer. Chino is one of the most interesting vocalists. But yeah, not my number 1 album. Kind of, wearing this to throw you off a bit, but it's still a fantastic album. Deathtones are just one of the best bands ever. Number 3 on my list, getting into the juicy bits. This album is called Nothing Is True and Everything Is Possible, and it's by the band Enter Shikari. This album for me is probably their most complete work to date. I don't think it's quite my favourite album. It's probably my second favourite Shikari album at this point. But I think it does a great job of summing up all of their individual parts that they've kind of become known for over the last 15 years or so. I think it's a sum of Shikari's career on one record. It's like a mission statement. And if you don't know who Enter Shikari are, I think for that reason, this would be a great album to start with. My favourite song on the record is actually Tina. I think the reason that this album isn't quite my favourite Shikari album is because they needed to replace that really pointless orchestral song, which the whole song is like 3 minutes of just an orchestra and a bit of drums from Sergeant Ralphie. Replace that song with something more like Rabble Rouser from the previous album, which is more of a hard-hitting, has a breakdown, more of like you can imagine it in a live setting and everyone going crazy for it. If they'd just done that, I think we'd be looking at the best Shikari album ever made. But this is still a fantastic achievement. I absolutely love it. I've been listening to it at least once or twice a week since it was released. And Shikari, a great band. I've never really understood why the rest of the world doesn't get them like we do in the UK. But yeah, that's my number 3 choice. So for my top 2, choosing which would get first place and which would get second place was the hardest thing I've done all year. And it genuinely did take me a while to decide who would be number 2, who would be number 1. And in the end, I narrowed it down to the fact that my album at number 1 is just more diverse than my album at number 2. Speaking of which, my album at number 2, our second trip down under, and a band who deserve far more success than has come their way so far, Ocean Grove with the album Flip Phone Fantasy. I first got into Ocean Grove 3 or 4 years ago now when they released the song Lights On Kind of Lover, which is a 90s influenced kind of post-hardcore metalcore-y song. It's just a bit mad. It was just a song where I was like, oh my god, who is this band? They're amazing. And I've pretty much been in love with them since day one of me listening to them. They released their first album 2 or 3 years ago now, which was called The Rhapsody Tapes. Thought it was absolutely fantastic. They then lost one of their founding guitarists and their founding harsh, shouty vocalist. They ended up bringing in Twiggy Hunter from the band The Beverly Chills. Just phenomenal name for a band. And they've made an album even better than the Rhapsody Tapes. Ocean Grove have successfully transitioned away from tropes of metalcore and post-hardcore and have become a more atmospheric, a more serene, a more, a bouncier band in some way. Another band that's quite difficult to put in a box. You would probably say this is an alt rock album with aspects of post hardcore and definitely some grunge elements to it. I think they undoubtedly, again, like I said with Napalm Death and punk, I think Ocean Grove wear their Nirvana and their grungy influences very much on their sleeve. Similar to Violent Soho, another Aussie band who I mentioned earlier on my list. A band that deserve way more success than they get. They're pretty popular in Australia as far as I know. I think this album was in the top 5, top 10 maybe of their album charts. But outside of Australia, yeah, they're not as well known as they should be. And it's a crying shame. But yeah, just what a band. This album is fun, it's energetic, it's bouncy, it's got great riffs, it's got great vocals. The drums are just, the drums are fantastic. The drummer, Sam Bassel, does like everything on these albums. He writes all of the music, and I think he produces pretty much the entire album as well. Just what an incredible talent. He's younger than me, so I hate him. Great band. Very hard to describe, and also very hard to describe my love for them. And with that in mind, it's going to be quite difficult to break down my number one album of the year. For those of you who know me well, you won't be surprised to know that my number one spot goes to Loathe with the album I Let It In and It Took Everything. Loathe are a predominantly metal band from Liverpool in England, and the reason I say predominantly metal is because they have so many elements to their music which isn't metal at all. That they are, again, very hard to put in a box, very hard to label, and they are all the better for it. So just running through the track list off the top of my head, this album has metal on it, it has black metal on it, it has metalcore on it. It has shoegaze, it has math rock, it has quite subtle elements of hip hop. It's it's a very eclectic album. No two songs are the same. 1 minute you've got Gourd, again, made a drum cover for that. You can click somewhere up here, which is just 3 minutes of caving your skull in. And then you'll have a song like Screaming, which is, despite the name, which is very ethereal, very beautiful, very soaring chorus. And then songs like, for me, my personal favourite song on the record, although this probably changes week on week depending on when you ask me, Two-Way Mirror, which is just kind of like I don't know, in many ways it's just an alt metal song or just an alt rock song. It's not particularly heavy, it's not aggressive, it's not loud, it's very much the antithesis of what Loathe have been pretty much up to this point in their career. But it just goes to show that they've dipped their toe into something for them which is almost entirely new, and they have knocked it out of the park. Two-Way Mirror is one of the best songs of the year, hands down. And then other songs on the album, like just mentioned, Screaming, A Sad Cartoon is another one, which is just unlike anything we've heard Loathe do before, and they nail it. It's a sign of five. There are five, aren't they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, five incredibly talented musicians who they're on the same page. They understand how each other play. They understand how to write songs together. And for me, this album is just one song after another of 10 out of 10 smash hits. There's not a single dull moment. There's no filler. There is nothing on it that I would remove. It's just, it's a perfect album. It's, at the moment, it's probably my third favourite album of all time, and I absolutely cannot wait to see where Loathe go next. So there we go. I've got to edit this puppy down, which is going to be fun, not. But as I said at the start, let me know what you guys think. Well, I didn't say that, but let me know what you think of my list in the comments, and leave your lists in there as well. If you did make it to the end, then leave a like. It would be really appreciated. Subscribe if you want. And check out, in the description I'll leave links to like the best songs from all these albums, in my opinion anyway. So if you want to check them out, then head down to the description and click on some links. But thanks very much for watching. Hope you're all safe and well. Hope you had a great, when's this video going to go up? I don't know. Hope you have or had a great Christmas. It's definitely going to go up before the new year, so have a great New Year's Eve. And here's to 2021 being a more stable year for all of us. But thanks very much for watching. Thank you all very much for your support throughout 2020. here's to 2021.